Welcome into this episode of How to Ride a Roller Coaster. I'm David Ezell, and today I'm joined by Aditya Varanasi. He's the founder of Awarity, which is an advertising agency that is disrupting the industry by making world-class marketing more affordable and sustainable for up-and-coming companies. What's going on?
Hey, thanks for having me on, David.
Yeah, man, it's so great. A lot of times whenever I'm doing this kind of thing, it feels like my guests are kind of a little bit of everywhere. You'll have somebody from Denver, so you're talking about things like the weather or how summer never ends in Texas, but you're right up the road.
I know, you're just a couple of blocks away, it sounds like.
Yeah, I wonder if that's going to change. This one would be super, super, like the voice and the sound will come in just even better because we're so close. So tell me some more about Awarity. How did you get there? Let's start with a little bit of your background, and then we'll dive into some a few more of the marketing aspects.
Yeah, I graduated from college as a chemical engineer, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a doctor, and I got a job offer at Frito-Lay. And when I came down to visit, I was at Purdue. I came down to visit, and I was like, wow, this place is really interesting. And it was interesting because it's a market leader.
Yeah.
And that's, it's easy to say, but you look there and then you see everybody is digging two levels deeper on how to not just be a leader, but stay ahead of the curve as an industry leader. So it's not about just getting to number one. It's about being ahead of everybody else to stay number one. I was like, wow, I could really learn something here. So I started at Frito-Lay. And I think the thing that really changed my view there was I worked on new product development, and I got exposed to marketing. It was the first time in my life I got exposed to the marketing team. I attended some focus groups. We're listening to consumer feedback on new products we're working on. I was like, this is fascinating. And I just found myself those days that I was working with the marketing team, I was a little more excited in the morning and a little more intrigued by what we're doing. Not to say I didn't love being an engineer and there weren't a lot of great people I worked with, but I found I was starting to get really passionate about it. And it was this intersection of, you have consumer behavior and consumer science, you have competitive strategy, you have product design, you have the financial implications, you have the sales side, you have kind of, at a company like Frito-Lay, you get to touch so many different components in the marketing group that it was kind of like golf. It was one of those things you can't ever get good enough. There's always something new to learn and something to improve on. And that really drew me to it. So much so that I moved to Chicago, got my MBA, and then came back to Frito-Lay in the brand marketing group.
Man, and you're right. It does feel like just from like the marketing to the engineering side, it's kind of like the different sides of your brain too. You can have the really data-driven focus of the engineering side, but then you can have some of that creativity and how do you really drive that data on the marketing side. So really, I think that that's a great way to kind of come into the marketing space too, so that it's not just, hey, I'm a designer, but I also love marketing and I'm completely left brain or right brain, whatever the case. It feels like you kind of have both of them kind of hemmed up.
No, and I think that's it. That's something I probably didn't know about myself at the time. But it kind of came to bear, and ultimately in how I got to what we're doing now at Awarity so I was on the Cheetos brand. And one of the things we were doing is we ran a marketing mix regression. So that means you take every input of what we've done from a brand standpoint. That could be advertising, pricing, retailer promotions, merchandising, competitive activity, other kinds of digital promotions. You take everything, you dump it into a model by week, and you look at, and the model will then spit out, it's a regression. It's just looking to see how much did each of those things ultimately impact growth. It's running a statistical analysis. So it comes back and it assigns a value to each item. We knew what we spent, so we could essentially get an ROI. I think there are two things that were really transformative from that. One is, you would never say as a brand manager, hey, I see that pricing discounts are driving the greatest or most efficient lift. Let's just put all of our money into pricing discounts.
Yeah.
We know that's just not how it works. You're going to erode the brand. That's only going to go so far. We know that it's a mix. But the second thing, and I think this is where the engineering side got to me, is I was curious how these variables interacted. And so one of the things I had them do is, on a limited fashion, because there's too many combinations, is let's look at the interaction of these variables. And what we found is that when you had TV running at the same time as merchandising, at the same time as pricing discounts, the lift you saw was greater than each of those individual coefficients.
Huh.
And It makes sense. So forget data, forget numbers for a second. You're a consumer, you're a young adult, you're sitting on the sofa, you see a Cheetos commercial, and you see Chester Cheetah making a mess, doing something playful, and you're like, oh yeah, Cheetos. It makes me feel like a kid again. You don't think that literally, but that's the feeling. It's playful, it's messy, it's orange. It's really unique in the world of snacks where your range is ice cream to potato chips to carrot sticks to goldfish to whatever. But it's like Cheetos is really unique. I feel a certain way. I haven't had that in a while. So it's not just building awareness to say, what's a Cheeto? It's top of mind awareness in a world that's really noisy. Then if it's in the back of your mind and you're in the grocery store and you see it on a merchandising unit, you're just more likely to notice it because it's in the back of your mind. Then you say, oh, it's on sale, 50 cents off. I'm going to grab a bag. And it's that culmination that goes into, of those touch points that goes into every purchase we make, whether it's conscious or subconscious. And that was really informative for me on how that full journey matters. It's easy to measure the finish line and say, hey, we saw this much lift when we discounted Cheetos 50 cents. But when you think of the full journey and put it through the customer lens, it actually looks very different to optimize for that.
I love that you touched on that. From that side of it, how can small businesses kind of compete to do that same thing where they may not have the marketing budget to have all of those touch points to make you think top of mind, but I'm not ready to purchase yet, but I want you to remember me. Maybe I'm not at the point also where I can discount at 50 cents because that's really eating into my profit. So how can small businesses also start to think in those same terms and maybe get some of those results?
Absolutely. And that's a perfect segue. So I left Frito-Lay in 2015. I was hired by a private equity firm. I was running a new insurance startup. And I said, I'm going to do the same thing we did at Frito-Lay. I'm going to have some things that are targeted awareness building. I'm going to facilitate brand engagement. And then we're going to do things to help, make purchase or that conversion, if you will, easier. And what I found was there really wasn't a tool to build targeted awareness. So in this particular business, we're going after small businesses looking for commercial insurance. So it's a very niche audience. Even though there's millions of them, it's still a relatively niche audience. So a local cable buy isn't going to work because less than 5% of the people watching at any given time are going to be a decision maker. So 95% of my money would be wasted. And I would spend a lot of money to produce a commercial and run it across the full DMA. A billboard's really not the right tool because, again, 95% of the people seeing it are not a target customer. Print was becoming more and more challenging, and the good print publications that were B2B had a strong digital component. They were really expensive because they knew what they had.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of stuck, and I said, what do I do here? And that's ultimately the inception of Awarity. I parted ways with that private equity firm, started Awarity. And the mission was to make that top of funnel advertising affordable and accessible to the masses. And so where we started is what's called programmatic advertising. So anytime you load up a website, let's say you go to yahoo.com and you see those ads show up in the margins, or when you read an article alongside the article or at the top of the page, those are banner ads.
Yeah.
Well, banner ads have been around for a while. People have had mixed success. Let's call a spade a spade. Some people think they don't work at all. But the problem had been they're really expensive. You had to spend $10,000, $20,000 a month plus just to get your foot in the door. And there weren't a lot of predefined industry standards on how to maximize effectiveness. And I had some experience with this at Frito-Lay on some of the brands I'd worked on, like Cheetos and Cracker Jack. And I got curious enough to know how this ecosystem works. And I said, I think there's a better way to do this. And if we make it focused on building targeted top of funnel awareness for small businesses, we can serve a need where there really isn't a solution on the market. I mean, I don't know, I may be dating myself, but I remember back in the day, if you were a small business and want to get noticed, you would simply buy a quarter page in the yellow pages.
Yep.
And that's how people would notice you and call you. Those days are gone. And all these businesses are pouring their money into Google and social. And, those can be effective channels, but that's because that's what they have access to. So the costs are going up. The effectiveness is arguably going down. The reach is limited. If you're on search, you're only reaching people at the time they're searching. And if you ever look at Google search queries, no query is actually that high. Like some of the biggest queries may only be 1,000 times or a few thousand times a day across the US, believe it or not.
Wow.
And so you're only reaching those people. In social, less than half of social media users are on the platform daily. So if you're trying to advertise to me per se, there could be weeks I don't go into Facebook.
Yeah.
You won't reach me.
Yeah.
But then when you think about banner ads, every single one of us is on websites every day. 2/3 of our time online is on websites. So I thought there's really a tool here that's being underutilized, is candidly developing a little bit of a bad reputation that I think we can reimagine. So what we had to do was do two things. One is we had to develop automation on how we buy this media, because for every 10 new clients we sign up, I can't hire another buyer, then the price will be too expensive.
Sure.
So it had to be affordable, and to be affordable, we had to use automation. And the second thing is it had to be effective. If you're a local restaurant and you're spending $300 a month with us, well, at a company like PepsiCo, that might be sofa change. People wouldn't even notice if you spent it or didn't spend it. But if you're a local restaurant, that could represent 50% of your monthly marketing budget. Yep. So it's got to do something. And we took a step back and developed our own algorithms, which ultimately became AI, on how we can optimize the cost economics of buying media here to maximize effectiveness. So there was a suite of tools we put together that didn't add to the CPM price, things that we could create ourselves, like a census database, for example, of where we can identify by zip code certain things. We developed advanced mapping so we can help businesses identify which zip codes fit that profile and were within a certain distance of their location. Things like that. We build the tool once, and then it's free data for our clients to get to know where to target. So we curated a number of these tools, and over time, we were able to get to a product where for $300 a month, we would guarantee at the time 100,000 hyper-targeted ad impressions, all inclusive. We included creative, because creative matters.
Yeah.
And you got those 100,000 impressions, no additional fees or charges outside of the one-time startup to get the campaign going. That was the birth of Awarity and what we do. And now this automation has uses. I'll just close this out. That we're finding that we didn't even imagine. You can use it in niche B2B businesses by targeting B2B specific websites. Or if let's say you're selling cloud computing. Well, when people are reading about cloud computing, we can target your ad there if they're in your service area. We're finding for franchises, rather than setting one campaign across the DMA, let's say you've got 50 locations in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We can set up 50 micro campaigns around each location with unique targeting, unique creative based on that location. So one location may say, hey, my customers come from 10 miles north and 1 mile south. We can set that up. They can actually set that up themselves.
Wow. Whenever you're talking with your customers or potential customers about the services that you guys offer, the platform, and all the data that goes on the back end of it, and how everything is driven by data so that they can actually see where their dollars are going, how people are being impacted, all of that kind of stuff. Do you find that it's a lot of also education around how data matters and how you should think about it, how it should drive? Yeah, you have to kind of lead with your heart, maybe from some of the creative and the marketing and messaging. But I mean, like you said, at the end of the day, I mean, if $300 is half of your marketing spend, you better have data backing it up to make sure. So if you guys seen that you do also spend a lot of time just helping your clients understand the data aspects of it?
We did. And I think what we did over time is, as we built out our app, our digital platform where our customers can engage, we learned over several years, what is the suite of information people want to see? But then how do we make what they really want 1 or 2 clicks away?
Yeah.
And so there are some customers, they just like to know what the choices are. They don't ever want to touch it, but they like to know that they can control it. There's others, they're really passionate about what websites am I on and what websites am I not on, or what websites are my customers visiting, what are they not. They can control that themselves. Some of them want to control the content they're on. Some of them want to control the geo. So we give them access to do it. But really, the way our process works now is, once we understand their industry and their target customer, these are things we get through kind of their onboarding form that they fill out. And we're actually turning this into a full self-service platform that's going to be powered by AI, where you just answer a couple of simple questions, and it's going to spit out a specific campaign strategy by scanning your website, looking at a host of other factors.
Wow.
and just give you a recommended campaign strategy. What we find is when they see it they see their strategy, they see the map, they see who we're targeting, they see the tools we're using to target, like, this makes sense. And I think that's what people are looking for. Not everybody feels comfortable getting into the weeds with their marketing data,
Sure.
but we take pride in bringing them along for the journey, and they can go as deep as they want. But what we find is a lot of them, they'll see the high level and they'll double click in a couple of areas and say, no, this makes a lot of sense. I trust it. Let's go. And then they could see the KPIs on the back end.
Yeah. And I think that's a great way to do it, because everybody's going to be different. Some people are going to want to see what hits and what doesn't and why. And they're going to want to dig and ask more questions. And other people are just going to say, yeah, that sounds good. Let's keep it going. We're seeing a spike in people coming through our front door or ordering our products. So let's go. Have you seen any, I don't want to say wrong ways of marketing, but like whenever you first sit down, that initial consultation, and a lot of these small businesses are saying, look, this is what we're doing so far. Have you seen there being a lot of kind of maybe repetitive things where you're like, oh man, I wish that I could have talked to them 6 months ago and said, look, yeah, I know that this is kind of what everybody does, but maybe let's not go that way.
Yeah, I think there's two common mistakes that we see, and they're really easy to make. The first one is, we're in this world right now where everybody wants to measure everything. So you want to say, I put in $10, I got $20 back, I made a smart decision. And so what that leads to in marketing is you invest in the things that are directly measurable, like search, for example. Because in search, you can see how many click to convert did you get. But what it misses out on are the 95% of activity that happened before that search and purchase occurred. So I'll use a sports analogy. And pardon me to you or any of your listeners if you're not a football fan, but if a head coach looked at their play sheet and said, which plays do we score touchdowns on most frequently? They would say, oh, it's the quarterback sneak or the fullback dive. It seems like half the time we run those plays, we either get a first down or a touchdown. So let's just run those every single play. Nobody ever says that.
Right.
There's a lot of things that had to happen, either get in position for the first down or the touchdown.
You're not always on the 1 yard line to run the sneak. Yeah,
exactly. And so that's ultimately the mistake, is then you end up pouring into trackability. There's limited reach, and you're not organically growing your business. You're only reaching the people that are actively searching. You're not doing anything to generate demand, generate brand distinction, build brand awareness. Those are the things in the long run that can actually make you less dependent on Google and save you money, because you're going to be bringing more people to you organically. I'll give you an example on our own business. We invested 3 years ago into improving the SEO on our website, working with a great firm. And we now are seeing much higher lead quality from our organic search than our paid search, so much so that we're going to shut down the majority of our paid search campaigns.
Wow.
So you couple the brand building we've invested in with the SEO, and we're not paying anywhere near as much, and we're getting more qualified leads out of it, but it takes time. So that's mistake number one, is just doing what you can measure. Because if I show you an ad for a vacuum cleaner, but your vacuum cleaner is working perfectly fine right now, but in 9 months it breaks, and that one feature I showed you about easy filter clean or no tangle mess or whatever that is stuck in your mind, and you buy it, how are you going to go back 9 months and say that ad gets the credit? That's just not the way people make decisions. Right. We make decisions on emotion, and then we rationalize it. And so that's the number one mistake, is people pour dollars into things that are directly measurable. What that ends up doing is you have very, very limited reach. You become dependent on one or two platforms, and then you're at the mercy of those platforms. And over time, you just end up spending more and more. The second mistake that we see is it's really easy to want to share everything. When we're working on a business, whether it's our own business or we're working for a company, we're proud of the things we're doing, and we want to share everything we're doing that's better than the competition. But we have to remember, consumers see 4,000 to 6,000 ads a day. And the ones that resonate are the ones that speak to us in terms of a pain point we may be experiencing. And they're simple and easy to digest. That's what breaks through the noise. So being able to go from, and trust me, it's a lot easier for me to do this for our clients' creative than our own. So I'm guilty. But it's really easy to say, these are all the things we do really well. But it's really hard to hone in and say, these are the one or two things that really stand out for our customers that make a difference versus the other choices on the market. How do we open the door and introduce ourselves with that? You know,
Yeah.
it's like dating, right? On your first date, you don't share every single detail about your life. You share those first few things and make sure that there's a fit. And
Yeah.
over time, through that customer journey, the customer learns more, you get to share more, and you figure
Yeah.
out if it's a long-term relationship.
And I love that, I mean, because that is the way that SEO should work, I mean, where you have the long tail things, but then if you need to turn on some of that ad spend, you can. But like you said, people buy at different times and it's emotional. Then you rationalize about it, and it may not be connected to that one ad, but that's building brand awareness. That's building top of the funnel so that they remember that that was a Dyson vacuum cleaner, had those cool features. My vacuum kind of sucks right now. Maybe I need to go back to that. And and I think that those are just great things that companies can start to put in that's not going to break the bank right away. They can start to do that organically, thinking about the long-term effects of it. Because like you said, that's really how people function anyway. That's consumer behavior. It's not beat you over the head with a huge billboard in Times Square and the ad's bigger, so more people are going to come buy from me. People people want to associate with something. They need the pain point and that touch point. And if that's there, they're a lot more likely to come back later.
Yeah, no, you know, I think where it's hard. So this is all great in theory, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners say that's great in theory, but I have a limited budget. I can't
Yeah.
afford to do all of that, and that's really why I started Awarity. Is I wanted to make this brand awareness component affordable to the masses. And honestly, if $300 a month doesn't fit your budget, it likely indicates there's some other things you need to work on to
Mm.
build your sales and marketing process with those lower funnel tactics. It may be iterating further on the website and doing some things that are, when I started this business, I first hit my own network. Then my wife and I got a membership at the Frisco Chamber of Commerce and shook a lot of hands. And that's how we learned. That's how we built the business. We didn't start with just advertising. We had to get to a certain stage where then we knew enough about how our products stood out to customers. We had enough scale to where in a sales and marketing process that we knew if we got people in from advertising, we had a better chance to captivate them after we crossed a certain stage versus at the very beginning. So I think that's a
Definitely.
decision every business has to make. But generally what I'll say is the rule of thumb is if you're north of 7 figures a year in revenue, you probably should be thinking about top of funnel. If you're less than that, I think it really does come down to your industry and vertical and your competition and what you want to do to stand out, how you want to allocate your budget to stand out.
And that's a great thing. So let's say that there are people out there that are just getting started. So solopreneurs, they're wearing every hat for their new business or their company. Let's say that they have $150 a month to do something. They don't know what to do. I could go put it into Facebook. I could put it on Google. But then again, like you said, 95% of that is probably going to somebody who's not a decision maker. So I'm losing that. But they're not thinking that, and they have the money. It's burning a hole. I'm ready to take that next thing to really start getting some marketing going. Where would you say to put it? And I love how you mentioned going to chambers and things like that, doing some of those grassroots tactics. But if you had $150 in your pocket and you could do that recurring every single month, where would you start?
I'd first start with making sure the website tells your story. And to me, at a glance, within 5 seconds, people should be able to understand what you do and one or two things that make you better in the competition. But then through a couple of clicks, people should be able to find answers to 80 to 90% of the common questions
Yeah.
you get. I would start there. Then make sure your website is SEO optimized, even if that just means meta tags so that you're searchable and crawlable and that you're appearing in relevant queries. It may not be fully optimized because that can require a fair bit of effort, but at least some level of optimization. Then you start diving into paid search. Even though it's a finite audience, you can spend $50 a month. You could run some advertising at $50 a month on social channels and be targeted on who you reach. It's not going to be broad reaching. There's going to be limitations, but those aren't bad places to start because if nothing else, you'll have that feedback loop of what are people responding to, what's bringing them to your site, what's the journey on their site. You want to boost that traffic so that way you could see how people are interacting, and that's going to inform where you go next, what messaging works, and what channels you can layer on.
So if somebody's wanting to pull the data from that, so seeing how people interact with your site, once that paid media has brought somebody to your site, they're reading through your FAQs, your services, whatever the case, are there any specific things like time on page, bounce rate, all of that? Where should I focus? What are the numbers that matter, and what are the numbers or the metrics that maybe more vanity that don't really tell the full story?
Yeah. The first thing I always look at are new users. And I like to look at new users from your target market. What we'll see on our site is there could be months where we have a huge spike in overseas visitors. One month it was Australia, one month it was China, one month it was Belgium. And there's something going on. Like, those aren't necessarily prospective customers. So we always look at our target area of the United States. How many new users per month are we seeing in the US? That's first and foremost, because that tells us how our non-attributable channels could be impacting site visit. And then we plot it against, we have a table and we say, this is when we did this. This is when our social content went out. This is when we made this announcement. This is when I spoke at an event. This is when we attended this conference. And we'll look at correlation among our new site visits and that. And we see it. You see a strong correlation. You'll see when PR kicks in, you'll see a spike in our traffic. You won't see that as clicks, but you'll see new users on the site. So that's a really important one. I think the second one is looking at the page flow of people that ultimately convert. So if somebody fills out a form, what pages did they look at before they filled out that form or made that purchase? Because that can indicate which content's resonating and which isn't resonating.
That's great.
And as best as you can do that with qualified leads, the better. Bounce rate's a little tricky because, like, if you take our website, we take pride in the fact that our homepage tells you the complete story. And we've seen this a lot where somebody will scan the homepage. They won't click to a second page or interact with anything. Then they'll come back later and fill out the form. But it looks like that was a bad session because they bounced because they didn't visit more than the main page. So it could be a little tricky on how the page is set up sometimes. That's a trade-off we were willing to make because we felt like it's a better user experience, even though we lose some trackability.
Sure.
Making all that information easy to find for potential customers, we thought outweighed the benefit. It goes back to, do you want to measure it or do you want it to work?
Right. Yeah, and those are great. And last question before we kind of wrap up. The first thing that you mentioned, measuring new users. So let's say that you have 13 new users this month, came through the funnel and landed on your site from a paid ad. So 13 new users. What do you do with that data then? Is that just who you target next in your next round of marketing? Or now that you know how many new users you have, what happens next?
So some of the things I would look at is I would look at the number and I would say, what did we do this month that could have gotten our name out there? And then what did we do last month that could have gotten our name out there? And how many users did we get then? I would go to the previous month to that. And I would look back as far as we could look back and start to see if any patterns emerge. Okay. A couple of patterns we've seen at times from our site is we may put an announcement on LinkedIn. It may not get a ton of direct interaction. Maybe it gets 20 to 40, 50 direct interactions. But we'll see that day and in the subsequent days after, hundreds of new people on our site each day increase after that announcement happened. So there's a lot of people that may not engage with the post. So if you just looked at post metrics, you might say it failed. But when you start to look at how that correlates to content coming out, brand building content being released, there's a much higher correlation. And look, this is not always going to be an exact science. At the end of the day, this is human influence. You're trying to make people feel something and act on it. It could happen overnight. It could take a week. It could take a month. And so the other thing I want to caution is try to look at these things directionally at best.
That's great. Aditya, I want to make sure everybody can follow you, keep up with Awarity. So like website, social channels, all of that good stuff. Where can people find you?
Yeah, first off, you can always visit us at awarity.com, awarity.com. If you're interested to see how we might be able to help, anybody can schedule a demo on our site. Somebody in our team will talk you through, we'll share a little bit about the platform, learn a little bit more about you, and then see if there's something we can do to help. And look, if we don't think it's going to be beneficial, we'll be the first to say, hey, you need to go take care of a few things, and then let's talk after this. Because we always want to be transparent on what clients can expect. And if somebody needs immediate sales, then top of funnel advertising may not be the right next step for them. And we're
Yeah.
always transparent on that. Because for us, it's about a long-term partnership where they can build this ongoing awareness. Second thing is they can check out on our website. We also have content. We have a free digital marketing 101 webinar that you can watch anytime on demand without a sign in.
Awesome.
We're constantly posting marketing tips of the month on our LinkedIn and Facebook channels with blog content. Again, just designed to help businesses learn one or two new things about marketing that we've experienced. And then for your listeners, if they'd like to visit our website and go to awarity.com/thegift, we'll perform a free marketing assessment for them. All they have to do is fill out the form.
Fabulous. Fabulous. And I will make sure that all of that is linked in the description when this goes live so that people can go and check out you, follow you guys on LinkedIn, check out all the marketing content that you guys are giving away. I think that's an amazing way to do it because it helps people build trust in you guys. It helps people have a little bit more confidence in what they're doing. And that also becomes a byproduct of you guys. So I love that you guys offer that. And I'll make sure that everybody that listens has that link super accessible. But Aditya, this has been fantastic.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for watching. Before you go, be sure to like the video and hit that subscribe button to be notified when the next episode comes out. Until next time.